France has a long and well-earned reputation for bread. For generations, it was defined by simplicity, patience, and a short list of basic ingredients. Because of that history, many people naturally assume that the bread lining supermarket shelves today still follows those same principles. What Consumer Reports suggest, however, is that this is no longer always the case. By the end of this video, you will know how to tell the difference. Bread itself is not the issue. The focus here is how some breads are now produced. Industrial shortcuts, extended shelf life strategies, and ingredient choices flagged by consumer watchdog groups have quietly reshaped products that still look familiar and trustworthy. This analysis isn't about taste, nostalgia, or judging French culture. It's about ingredients, processing methods, and patterns identified in publicly available reports, and why those details matter over time. Take note that this video is intended for educational and commentary purposes only, and is based on publicly available information at the time of production. Let's begin. Bread. 12. Many consumers choose this bread because it appears reliable and accessible. It is widely available through a major supermarket chain, priced affordably, and marketed as extra soft, which appeals to families looking for convenience. Its consistency and long shelf life often signal practicality rather than processing, leading many shoppers to view it as a neutral, everyday staple. According to publicly available consumer reports, including findings discussed by independent consumer watchdog organizations, some tests have raised questions about the presence of pesticide residues and mycotoxins in a portion of analyzed packaged sandwich breads within this category. These findings vary by batch and are generally linked to agricultural practices and storage conditions rather than baking alone. Consumer groups have noted that such residues are not uncommon across this segment of the market. From a production perspective, this bread reflects a more industrial approach than traditional bread making. Reports indicate the use of preservatives such as calcium propionate and emulsifiers intended to maintain softness and extend shelf life. Salt levels are also higher than those typically found in slow-fermented breads. These choices prioritize stability and distribution efficiency over time-intensive fermentation. Why does this matter for informed consumers? Some researchers have raised concerns about frequent exposure to certain additives and pesticide residues, noting associations with digestive discomfort, metabolic stress, or hormonal balance in some studies. Occasional consumption is not the same as regular intake, and individual responses can differ. The key point is awareness of how processing methods may influence how bread is experienced by the body over time. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread. 11. This bread is commonly chosen because it fits easily into everyday routines. Sold widely through a major supermarket chain, it is priced affordably, stays soft for long periods, and is marketed as extra soft. For many households, it functions as a reliable option for toast and sandwiches, and its long shelf life is often interpreted as a sign of practicality rather than heavy processing. According to publicly available consumer watchdog reports, including analyses discussed by independent consumer organizations, some independent tests have raised questions about the presence of pesticide residues and mycotoxins in certain packaged sandwich breads within this category, including products sold under this brand. These findings vary depending on batch and sourcing, and are generally linked to wheat treatment and storage conditions prior to baking. Consumer groups have noted that these issues appear across multiple supermarket brands rather than being isolated to one product. From a processing standpoint, this bread reflects common industrial baking practices. Public ingredient information points to the use of preservatives intended to slow mold development, along with emulsifiers that help maintain softness and structural consistency. Salt levels are also relatively elevated compared to traditional breads made with longer fermentation. These choices help ensure stability during transport and storage, but differ from time-based methods used in artisanal baking. Why this matters for informed choice is not about alarm but context. Some studies have associated frequent exposure to certain additives or residues with digestive discomfort or metabolic stress in sensitive individuals. Occasional consumption does not carry the same considerations as daily intake, and responses vary widely. Understanding how processing choices differ from traditional methods allows consumers to decide what aligns best with their preferences. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. Bread 10. This bread benefits from the trust often placed in large retailers. As a house brand, it is widely available, competitively priced, and promoted with terms like extra soft or long shelf life. Many consumers assume that store brands undergo strict internal controls, which can reduce the perceived need for further scrutiny. Public consumer reports suggest a more nuanced picture. Some independent analyses have reported the detection of pesticide residues such as cypermethrin, along with mycotoxins, in certain batches of supermarket-packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand. These findings are not uniform across all units and are generally associated with agricultural sourcing and storage practices. Consumer watchdog groups regularly emphasize that such results can fluctuate between batches. In terms of production, this bread follows an industrial model designed for consistency. Ingredient lists indicate the use of preservatives like calcium propionate and emulsifiers to maintain texture and extend shelf life. Salt content is also higher than what is typically used in slow-fermented bread. These methods support large-scale distribution but differ significantly from traditional baking approaches that rely on time rather than additives. For consumers, the relevance lies in understanding patterns rather than drawing conclusions. Some research has linked frequent intake of highly processed bread to digestive discomfort or cardiovascular considerations, particularly when combined with higher sodium intake. These associations do not imply direct outcomes and vary by individual and frequency of consumption. Bread 9. This bread is often selected because it presents itself as a more balanced option. Visible grains, multi-cereal labeling, and health-oriented marketing create the impression of a product designed with nutrition in mind. Its softness and versatility also make it appealing for everyday meals. According to consumer watchdog publications, some independent tests have reported multiple pesticide residues in certain multigrain packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand. These residues are generally associated with wheat cultivation and storage, rather than added grains themselves. As with other brands, findings vary by batch, and watchdog groups caution against assuming uniformity across all products. From a processing perspective, this bread still relies on industrial techniques. While some lines emphasize reduced additives, the overall formulation continues to use stabilizing ingredients to ensure shelf life and uniform texture. The added grains serve visual and marketing purposes, but do not necessarily indicate long fermentation or minimal processing. Why this distinction matters is subtle. Some studies have linked regular consumption of highly processed grain products with metabolic strain or reduced digestive comfort, particularly when fiber content remains modest. These associations are not guarantees and depend heavily on overall diet and frequency of intake. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. Bread 8. This bread is designed around convenience. Its extended shelf life appeals to busy households, and its low cost and wide availability reinforce its role as a dependable staple. Longevity is often framed as a benefit rather than a signal of processing complexity. Consumer watchdog reports provide additional context. Some independent analyses have identified multiple pesticide residues and mycotoxins in certain long shelf life packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand. These findings are generally linked to flour sourcing and prolonged storage before baking. As always, results can vary by batch, and consumer groups stress the importance of ongoing monitoring. To achieve extended conservation, this bread relies on preservatives such as E282, emulsifiers, and higher salt levels. These ingredients help stabilize texture and slow spoilage, allowing the product to remain soft over time. This approach contrasts with traditional bread making, where shorter shelf life is expected due to minimal intervention. For consumers, the relevance lies in understanding trade-offs. Some researchers have raised concerns about frequent exposure to additive-heavy foods and higher sodium intake, noting possible associations with digestive or cardiovascular considerations over time. These are associations, not direct outcomes, and depend on overall dietary patterns. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread 7. This brand is often chosen because it looks and feels closer to bakery bread. The branding emphasizes warmth, familiarity, and a traditional image, even when the products are sold in large retail chains. Items like soft rolls and hot dog buns visually resemble fresh bakery goods, which can create the impression of simpler production and higher quality. According to publicly available consumer reports and discussions referenced by watchdog organizations, some independent tests have raised questions about the presence of pesticide residues in certain products from large-scale bakery brands, including products sold under this brand. These findings are typically associated with wheat sourcing and centralized production rather than the final baking step. As with other brands discussed, results may vary by batch and over time, and consumer groups caution against drawing blanket conclusions. From a production standpoint, this brand relies on industrial processes designed to support volume and consistency. Public information indicates the use of frozen or partially prepared dough in large facilities, along with additives that help manage hydration, texture, and stability after thawing. Preservative strategies may also be used to maintain softness once products are distributed. These methods differ from traditional baking, where dough is prepared and baked locally with limited intervention. Why this matters is primarily about transparency. Some researchers have raised concerns about frequent consumption of highly processed baked goods, noting associations in some studies with digestive discomfort or blood sugar variability, particularly when fiber content is low. These associations do not imply direct effects and depend on overall diet and frequency of intake. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread 6. This brand is frequently viewed as a more refined option within the packaged bread category. Its presentation feels premium, with messaging that highlights certain ingredient choices and positions. The brand is a step above basic supermarket loaves. This positioning leads many consumers to assume that these products are closer to traditional bread-making standards. Consumer watchdog analyses suggest a more complex reality. While individual test results vary, public reports indicate that many packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand, share similar supply chains. Some independent analyses have raised questions about pesticide residues and additive patterns across this category, reflecting broader agricultural and industrial practices rather than brand-specific decisions. From a processing perspective, this bread relies on emulsifiers and stabilizers to maintain its characteristic softness and consistency. These ingredients help standardize texture across large production volumes and extend shelf life. While certain claims emphasize what is excluded from the recipe, the overall method remains aligned with industrial baking rather than slow fermentation. For consumers, this distinction matters because processing method influences how bread behaves when eaten regularly. Some studies have associated frequent intake of highly processed breads with digestive discomfort or reduced satiety in some individuals. These are associations rather than outcomes and depend on many factors, including overall dietary patterns. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread 5. This bread is commonly selected in casino stores because it is affordable and familiar. Marketed as extra soft and suitable for everyday use, it fits easily into household routines. Its role as a store brand often creates an assumption of baseline quality and internal oversight. Publicly available consumer reports provide additional context. Some independent tests discussed by watchdog groups have raised questions about the presence of pesticide residues and mycotoxins in certain supermarket packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand. These findings are generally associated with flour sourcing and storage conditions rather than isolated production errors. As with similar products, results can vary by batch. To support long shelf life and uniform texture, this bread relies on preservatives such as calcium propionate, emulsifiers, and relatively higher salt levels. These ingredients help maintain softness and visual consistency across distribution. This approach contrasts with traditional bread making, where shorter shelf life is expected due to minimal processing. Why this matters is not about alarm but context. Some researchers have noted associations between frequent consumption of additive-heavy foods and digestive discomfort or blood pressure considerations in certain populations. These associations are not guarantees and depend on overall intake and individual sensitivity. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread 4. This brand benefits from long-standing brand recognition. Its heritage and positioning create the impression of experience and quality which can reassure consumers choosing packaged bread. Many assume that established brands maintain higher standards simply through longevity and reputation. Consumer watchdog reports suggest a more nuanced picture. Some independent analyses have noted that branded packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand, share similar pesticide residue patterns with other mass-market breads. These findings are generally associated with shared agricultural supply chains and large-scale processing rather than brand-specific decisions. Results can differ between batches, and consumer groups emphasize ongoing monitoring. From a processing perspective, this bread relies on stabilizers, preservatives, and relatively higher salt content to maintain softness and shelf life. These ingredients help ensure consistency across wide distribution, but reflect industrial baking methods rather than slow fermentation. The visual and textural qualities are carefully managed through formulation rather than time. For consumers, this distinction matters because processing influences how bread fits into a broader diet. Some studies have linked frequent intake of highly processed breads with digestive discomfort or cardiovascular considerations in certain populations. These are associations rather than outcomes, and vary with overall dietary patterns. Remember, this is not advice or instruction, but an awareness-based breakdown meant to encourage you to look deeper, read labels yourself, and form your own conclusions. If this kind of ingredient-focused investigation matters to you, subscribing helps support and continue this type of work. Bread 3. These products are often chosen because they offer convenience without the feel of traditional packaged bread. Sold frozen and intended to be baked at home, they are marketed as a way to recreate a fresh bakery experience while avoiding daily shopping. For many consumers, freezing is associated with control and preservation, which can increase trust in the product. According to publicly available consumer discussions and watchdog observations, frozen bread products are not exempt from the same upstream considerations seen in other industrial breads. Some independent analyses have raised questions about pesticide residues present in similar bread categories, including frozen dough products sold under this brand. These observations are generally linked to wheat sourcing and pre-freezing storage rather than the freezing process itself. As with all such findings, results may vary by batch and over time. From a production standpoint, frozen breads require additional technical adjustments. Public ingredient information suggests the use of emulsifiers and stabilizers to help dough maintain structure through freezing, transport, and baking at home. Preservative strategies and salt are also used to support consistency. These methods differ from traditional fresh baking, where dough is prepared and baked within a shorter time frame. Why this matters for informed choice is largely about expectations. Some researchers have associated frequent consumption of heavily processed grain products with digestive discomfort or reduced nutrient availability in certain individuals. These associations depend on overall diet and frequency of intake and do not imply direct effects from occasional consumption. Bread 2. This bread is commonly selected for its affordability and consistency. Positioned as an everyday sliced bread at Intermarché, it emphasizes softness and reliability. Its role as a practical staple often leads consumers to view it as a neutral option that does not require much evaluation. According to consumer watchdog publications, some independent tests have raised questions about pesticide residues and mycotoxins in certain supermarket packaged sandwich breads, including products sold under this brand. These findings are typically associated with wheat sourcing and storage conditions rather than final baking. As with similar products, results may vary by batch and over time. To achieve long shelf life and stable texture, this bread relies on preservatives such as calcium propionate, emulsifiers, and elevated salt levels. These ingredients help maintain softness, but differ from traditional bread making where shorter shelf life is expected. The focus is on durability and uniformity across large distribution networks. Why this matters is largely about awareness. Some researchers have raised concerns about frequent consumption of additive-heavy foods, noting associations with digestive irritation or blood pressure considerations in certain individuals. These associations are influenced by overall diet and frequency of intake rather than occasional use. Bread 1. This bread builds trust through accessibility and price. Widely available in hypermarkets and marketed for family use, it presents itself as a simple and dependable option. Its soft texture and mild flavor reinforce the perception of familiarity and ease. Publicly available consumer analyses provide additional context. Some independent tests discussed by watchdog groups have raised questions about pesticide residues and mycotoxins in certain batches of supermarket breads, including products sold under this brand. These observations are generally linked to large-scale wheat sourcing and storage practices. Consumer groups emphasize that results can vary and should be interpreted cautiously. From a production standpoint, this bread uses chemical preservatives, dough conditioners, and salt to support extended shelf life. These ingredients help maintain consistency across distribution, but reflect industrial baking strategies rather than traditional fermentation-based methods. For informed consumers, the relevance lies in understanding these trade-offs. Some studies have associated frequent intake of highly processed breads with digestive discomfort or metabolic considerations in certain individuals. These associations depend on broader dietary patterns and do not imply direct effects from isolated consumption. How to choose a good bread brand. After reviewing many well-known brands, the most useful outcome is not memorizing names, but learning how to evaluate bread independently. This is where informed choice becomes possible. The first place to look is always the ingredient list. Breads made with fewer ingredients generally rely more on process than formulation. Flour, water, yeast or sourdough, and salt describe a method. Long lists describe a strategy for stability and shelf life. Preservatives, emulsifiers, and dough conditioners are not automatically problematic, but they signal that the bread is designed to behave in a specific way over time. According to food researchers, these ingredients are used to control softness, moisture, and mold growth. Understanding why they are present helps contextualize the product rather than judge it. A bread that stays very soft for many days is behaving differently from bread made with minimal intervention. Texture over time is another practical indicator. Traditionally made bread changes as it ages. It firms up and dries slightly. Industrial bread is formulated to resist that change. This difference does not mean one is forbidden and the other is ideal. It simply reflects different priorities in production. Being aware of that difference allows consumers to choose based on their own preferences and frequency of consumption. Marketing language also deserves caution. Terms like artisanal, tradition, or countryside do not have strict regulatory definitions in packaged bread. They describe an image, not a method. Consumer watchdog groups often recommend focusing on ingredients and nutritional panels rather than front-of-package claims. What matters most is what is inside the product and how it was made. Another overlooked factor is personal response. Some people notice bloating, heaviness, or fatigue after eating certain breads. Researchers note that these reactions can be influenced by processing methods, fiber content, and individual sensitivity. Occasional consumption may feel very different from daily intake, and experiences vary widely. This video does not replace label reading or professional guidance. It is meant to support awareness. Consulting ingredient lists, comparing products, and reviewing independent consumer reports are the most reliable ways to make decisions that fit your own context. The broader takeaway from this analysis is simple. Bread itself is not the issue being examined. Production choices are. When time, fermentation, and ingredient simplicity are replaced with strategies focused on shelf life and consistency, bread becomes a very different product, even if it looks familiar. This video is for educational and commentary purposes only and reflects publicly available information at the time of writing. Test results can vary by batch, and occasional consumption is not the same as habitual intake. The goal is not avoidance but understanding. If you have noticed differences in how various breads feel to you, sharing those observations can help others think more critically. And if this kind of research-based, neutral analysis is useful, subscribing supports ongoing exploration rather than rigid conclusions.